The first thing she ever said to me was, "Take that sign down. The lake belongs to the community now." And the crazy part is, she said it while standing on my dock, drinking coffee out of a mug with her HOA logo printed on the side, like she was already queen of the place. I remember looking past her shoulder at the water that morning, watching the fog roll low across the surface, and thinking, this woman has absolutely no idea whose land she's standing on. What she also didn't know was that every single drop in that lake could disappear by sunrise if I decided to turn one valve. My name's Caleb Mercer. I'm 59 years old, and up until 2 years ago, I figured the rest of my life was going to be quiet. I'd earned that quiet honestly. 34 years working hydraulic systems for the Tennessee Valley Authority will age a man in strange ways. You stop hearing rivers like regular people hear rivers. You start hearing pressure, movement, stress, weak points. Water talks if you listen long enough. My grandfather used to say the same thing. He built Blackwater Lake in 1956 with 2 mules, 1 bulldozer that barely ran, and enough stubbornness to qualify as a medical condition. 140 acres outside Ashby Ridge, North Carolina, back before developers started turning every patch of mountain land into luxury rustic living for people who think plaid shirts count as outdoor experience. That lake wasn't just property to us. It was birthdays, funerals, fishing trips, first kisses, arguments, thunderstorms. My entire family history sat in that water. My wife, Ellie, used to sit on the south dock every evening around sunset with a paperback novel she never actually read because she spent most of the time watching the reflection move across the trees. Pancreatic cancer took her in 11 months. Fastest 11 months of my life, and somehow also the slowest. After she passed, the house got so quiet I started leaving the television on just to hear another voice in the room. Then came Silver Creek Estates. 43 custom homes carved right into the Pine Ridge north of my property. Gated entrance. Artificial waterfall. Stone sign out front big enough to qualify as a Civil War monument. Average home price was somewhere around $1.8 million, which meant every person moving in arrived already convinced the world had been waiting for them personally. And leading that circus was Vanessa Crane. Now listen, I've met difficult people before. Construction managers, politicians, federal inspectors, Army engineers, all kinds. But Vanessa had this polished kind of arrogance that almost impressed you at first, like she'd practiced it in a mirror. Blonde hair, always perfect. White SUV, always spotless. Wore sunglasses indoors like she thought she was being followed by paparazzi in rural North Carolina. First letter showed up in June. Dear Mr. Mercer, welcome to the Silver Creek residential community. I'd been living there 31 years. The letter informed me that Blackwater Lake was being rebranded as Silver Cove Reservoir 4 Shared Neighborhood Recreational Enhancement. I remember laughing out loud at the kitchen table because I genuinely thought it was satire. Then I kept reading and stopped laughing. They wanted me to remove my boathouse because it conflicted with the Visual Cohesion Initiative. Visual Cohesion Initiative. That's rich coming from people who bulldozed half a mountain to install wine patios. I drove into town, made 3 copies of the letter, and bought a black binder from Office Depot. Nothing fancy, cheap plastic thing, but I labeled the spine in silver marker. Silver Creek. That binder eventually got too heavy for one shelf. Things escalated while I was gone visiting my daughter in Knoxville. Emma had just finalized her divorce, and honestly she needed somebody around for a few days. So I drove down there with groceries, fixed a leaking sink, helped move furniture, normal dad stuff. We watched old movies one night, and she fell asleep on the couch with her head against my shoulder exactly like she used to when she was little. I stayed an extra day because she asked me to. That decision cost Vanessa Crane $2 million. I knew something was wrong before I even reached my driveway coming home. Heard diesel engines echoing through the trees. Heavy equipment. Metal clanging. The kind of industrial noise that doesn't belong near a quiet lake unless somebody's either building something expensive or destroying something important. When I came over the ridge and finally saw the shoreline, I just sat there behind the steering wheel for a second staring. 20, maybe 25 workers were spread across my lakefront. Concrete pylons already driven into the water. Excavators chewing through the bank where Ellie used to grow wildflowers. Temporary fencing. Lumber stacks. Portable generators. And right in the middle of it all stood Vanessa Crane holding rolled-up blueprints under one arm, like she was overseeing the construction of the Hoover Dam. She smiled when she saw me pull up. That was the moment I realized this woman truly believed she owned my lake. And honestly, that's when the whole thing stopped being annoying and started becoming personal. She walked toward my truck smiling like we were old friends meeting at a country club brunch, instead of standing ankle-deep in trespassing lawsuits. "Mr. Mercer," she said, real sweet. "I was beginning to worry you wouldn't cooperate." Cooperate? I looked past her at a crane swinging steel beams over my grandfather's lake, and for a second I honestly couldn't process the level of confidence it took to say something like that out loud. "What exactly do you think you're doing on my property?" I asked her. Vanessa gave this tiny little sigh like I was being difficult on purpose. "The board voted unanimously on the Marina expansion project. We sent notices." "You sent letters," I said. "That's not the same thing." She handed me a thin folder with color printouts inside. Site plans, renderings, architectural sketches showing smiling couples drinking wine beside water they did not own. And right there clipped to the front was what they called a shared access easement agreement. Problem was, nobody in my family had signed a damn thing. No county filing, no court order, nothing legal whatsoever. Just expensive paper and arrogance. I remember flipping through it slowly while diesel engines rattled behind us, and Vanessa standing there completely certain the paperwork itself made reality bend around her. "You built all this without permission?" I asked. She smiled wider. "We've already invested $1.9 million into Phase 1. And there it was. That sentence told me everything. She thought money was ownership. Thought expensive people automatically outranked old families with dirt roads and faded docks. I handed the folder back. Didn't yell. Didn't threaten her. Didn't even argue. Just said, "That's a hell of a gamble, ma'am." Then I got back in my truck and drove to the house. She actually looked confused watching me leave. I don't think Vanessa Crane had much experience with quiet men. Loud people she understood. Angry people too. But silence unsettles certain personalities because they mistake it for surrender. What she didn't understand was that I'd spent 34 years around dams. Panic gets people killed around water. Calm keeps things standing. That night, I opened the old gun safe in my office and pulled out a faded green ledger my grandfather kept during construction of Blackwater Lake. Handwritten measurements, soil reports, spillway schematics, valve diagrams, original water rights documents. My grandfather documented everything because men from his generation understood something modern people forgot. Paperwork outlives arguments. Around midnight, I made coffee and started building a timeline. Every letter, every photograph, every violation, every date. Then I made 3 phone calls. First was to the county recorder's office. Second was to an old friend named Roy Bennett who retired from state environmental compliance. Third call was to my neighbor Walter Griggs. Walter's 72, Vietnam vet, stubborn as a fence post, and owns the pasture bordering the Eastern Creek bed downstream from my dam. "Caleb," he said after listening quietly for maybe 2 minutes. "You telling me these idiots built a marina on your lake?" "Looks that way." Long silence. Then he laughed so hard he started coughing. "Lord have mercy," he wheezed. "I think I'm gonna enjoy watching this." Things got uglier fast after that. About a week later, I walked down to my dock one morning and found my fishing boat gone. Aluminum tracker boat, old but reliable, had belonged to my father before me. In its place was a laminated notice zip-tied to the dock rail saying the vessel had been impounded for violating Silver Creek Marina registration policy. They had literally stolen my boat from my own property, then fined me for it. I drove around the shoreline and eventually found it locked behind a temporary chain-link fence beside their construction site, along with 3 other boats belonging to local residents. Vanessa had started treating the entire lake like HOA territory. That was the moment the neighborhood started turning against her. See, rich developments always assume rural folks won't organize because everybody keeps to themselves out here. But country people operate different than suburban boards. We might mind our own business most days, but we remember who helped us during storms. We remember funerals. We remember who plowed roads in winter. My family had lived there generations before Silver Creek existed. Vanessa underestimated that badly. Walter started bringing over trail cameras. My friend Denise from town helped me pull county filings. Roy quietly pointed me toward permit irregularities that shouldn't have existed. Every day new fines showed up in my mailbox. Unauthorized shoreline use. Unauthorized pet activity because my old Labrador Duke walked near the marina entrance. Improper dock aesthetics. At one point they fined me for negative engagement with community growth initiatives, which honestly might still be the funniest thing anybody's ever accused me of. I saved every single envelope, every notice, every signature. The binder got thicker. Then came the first real crack in Vanessa's empire. Roy called me one Tuesday evening and said, "Caleb, you need to look at the contractor records." Turns out the company building Silver Creek Marina had only existed for 47 days before receiving a $2 million no-bid contract approved directly through County Development Review. The owner of the company was hidden behind 2 LLCs registered in Delaware, but eventually one name surfaced. Ethan Crane, Vanessa's husband, County Zoning Commissioner. I just sat there at the kitchen table staring at the paperwork while Duke snored beside the fireplace. Because suddenly this wasn't just some power-hungry HOA president bullying landowners anymore. This was fraud. Big fraud. Federal fraud. They'd used county influence to approve construction on land they didn't own using shell companies tied to public officials. And they'd done it assuming nobody around Blackwater Lake was educated enough or patient enough to untangle it. That part bothered me more than anything. Not the marina. Not the fines. The disrespect underneath all of it. The assumption that country people were stupid. A few days later, Vanessa came to my front gate herself. White SUV. Perfect makeup. Angry this time. "You've been interfering with contractors," she snapped before I even said hello. "Your signs are hurting property values." I'd recently posted private property and active water control structure notices around the shoreline. Entirely legal. Entirely accurate. "You built a resort on my lake," I told her. "I'd say your property values got bigger problems than my signs." Her face tightened right then. That polished fake smile finally cracked a little. "You know," she said quietly, "people like you always resist progress because you're afraid of being left behind." I actually laughed at that. Couldn't help it. "Ma'am," I said, "my grandfather built this lake before your husband was born. You're not progress. You're trespassing with landscaping." Thought smoke might come out her ears. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "The board can make life very difficult for you, Mr. Mercer." "Funny thing about that," I told her, "so can gravity." She frowned like she didn't understand the sentence. That made me smile all evening. But underneath the humor, things were moving towards something serious now. Because while Vanessa was threatening fines and legal reviews, I was quietly meeting with state dam inspectors. And one of those inspectors, a gray-haired engineer named Frank Delaney, who'd worked water systems almost as long as I had, stood beside me at the spillway one cold October morning staring at the marina pylons drilled into the lake bed, and finally said the words I'd been waiting to hear. "Caleb," he murmured, "if those supports were installed without proper geological review, you may have grounds for an emergency structural drawdown. Now, if you don't work around reservoirs, that probably sounds boring. But let me translate. It meant the state of North Carolina was giving me legal authority to drain my own lake." And suddenly, Vanessa Crane's beautiful $2 million marina had a very serious problem. I didn't tell anybody about the drawdown authorization at first. Not Emma. Not Walter. Not even Roy. I just carried the paperwork folded inside my jacket for almost 2 weeks, while Silver Creek kept throwing money at that marina like they were building the 8th wonder of the world. And honestly, watching them celebrate became surreal after a while because I knew something they didn't. Every cocktail party, every investor tour, every smug little newsletter Vanessa mailed out talking about luxury waterfront living was balanced on top of water that could vanish overnight. There's something almost biblical about that if you think about it too long. The final straw came 3 days before the grand opening gala. Somebody slashed all 4 tires on my truck while it sat outside the feed store in town. Real clean cuts too. Fast work. Sheriff pulled nearby camera footage, and there was Vanessa's son, Tyler, 17 years old and dumb enough to wear his Silver Creek security pullover while doing it. That kid had the exact same expression his mother did. That rich person confidence where consequences feel optional. Sheriff asked if I wanted to press charges. I told him not yet. "You're awfully calm about this," he said. I remember leaning against the hood of the tow truck watching sunset hit the mountains and saying, "I think they're about to punish themselves harder than I ever could." Friday night before the Marina Gala, Blackwater Lake looked beautiful. Still, moonlight stretching silver across the surface. Music drifting faint through the trees from Silver Creek, where workers were setting up catering tents and string lights. I stood inside the old pump house with my grandfather's ledger open beside me and rested my hand on the steel valve wheel for a long moment. Funny thing is, I almost backed out right there. Not because Vanessa deserved mercy. She didn't. But because draining that lake felt personal. Sacred almost. Like disturbing family ground. Then I looked through the small window, toward the shoreline where Ellie's flower beds had been bulldozed for boat parking, and suddenly my hesitation disappeared. At 9:42 p.m., I closed the spring intake. At 9:47, I primed the siphon line. At exactly 10:03 p.m., I opened the emergency discharge valve. You ever hear millions of gallons of water begin moving through steel pipe in the middle of the night? Sounds alive. Low, deep vibration under your feet, like the mountain itself clearing its throat. I stood there listening until the system stabilized, then shut off my flashlight and walked back up to the house. Didn't sleep much. Just sat on the porch drinking coffee while the lake slowly emptied itself into the creek valley downstream. Around 4 in the morning, thick fog rolled over the basin, and by sunrise Blackwater Lake was gone. Not lowered. Gone. 20 acres of exposed mud and tilted boat docks stretched across the valley floor like another planet. The marina looked insane hanging there unsupported above cracked lake bed. All those polished walkways and champagne decks suspended 15 feet in the air with expensive boats collapsed sideways in the sludge underneath. One yacht had rolled almost completely onto its side. Looked like a dying whale. I'll admit something here I probably shouldn't. Seeing it felt incredible. Not because I enjoy destruction. I don't. But because for the first time since Ellie died, something inside me finally stopped feeling powerless. The first guests arrived around 8 that morning. Luxury SUVs pulling into a marina attached to absolutely no water whatsoever. Folks stepping out dressed for wine tasting and finding themselves staring at mud, stranded pontoon boats, and thousands of dead fish flopping in puddles. One woman burst into tears immediately. Somebody else threw up near the pavilion. The string quartet packed up before they even unloaded their instruments. And right at 8:26 a.m. Vanessa Crane arrived. White dress, pearls, perfect hair, ready for her big ribbon-cutting moment. I watched her walk toward the shoreline smiling, and I swear to God the exact second she realized what she was looking at, it physically changed her face. Like watching somebody age 10 years in one breath. She spotted me standing beside Walter near the gate and came storming across the gravel screaming before she even reached us. What did you do? Everybody turned. Caterers froze. Investors froze. Half the homeowners stood there holding champagne glasses, staring back and forth between us like they'd wandered into the wrong movie. I let her yell a while. Then I handed her the state authorization paperwork. Emergency structural drawdown, I said calmly. Issued by North Carolina Water Control Authority under Reservoir Safety Statute. She looked down at the papers, then back toward the empty basin. You drained my lake, she screamed. And that right there, that sentence might have been the single biggest mistake of her entire life. Because standing 20 feet away were 2 FBI agents already walking toward us across the parking lot. Turns out Roy had quietly forwarded the contractor fraud evidence to federal investigators 2 weeks earlier. They'd been waiting for the gala because public corruption cases love witnesses. Ethan Crane was arrested beside the champagne fountain. Vanessa started crying once the handcuffs came out. Real crying too. Mascara running. Shoulders shaking. Whole performance collapsed right there in front of everyone she'd spent 2 years intimidating. As agents led her past me, she stopped and looked back toward the drained lake one last time. It was just a stupid piece of water, she muttered. And maybe she expected me to yell. Maybe she expected revenge speech or triumph or something dramatic. But honestly, by then I just felt tired. So I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "No, ma'am. It was my family." They removed the marinas 6 months later after insurance denied every claim tied to fraudulent permitting. Most Silver Creek residents eventually apologized. Some genuinely didn't know what the Cranes were doing behind closed doors. A few still blame me for everything, though, which honestly is why I'm telling this story now. Because I still get letters sometimes saying I overreacted, that draining the lake was cruel, that there had to be another way. Maybe there was. Maybe there wasn't. I know this much, though. People like Vanessa count on decent folks staying quiet because confrontation feels uncomfortable. They build entire lives around the assumption nobody will ever push back hard enough to matter. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes they run into an old reservoir engineer with nothing left to lose and a valve older than they are. So you tell me, was I justified? Or did I go too far protecting what belonged to my family? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I genuinely want to know where people stand on this one. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare, crooked developers, or somebody trying to bully you off your own land, I want to hear that story too. Trust me, around here, we read every single comment.